So I've never worked anywhere where everyone kind of pulls together quite in the same way. You know, everyone's kind of, if you ask someone a question, they'll direct you to the right person if they didn't know the answer. I mean, with work experience, I have to work across the entire trust with different wards, departments, hospitals, and everyone's kind of very friendly. They kind of help you out where they can. No, I've never worked anywhere where there's kind of such a sort of a community feel, where you kind of just, everyone kind of just pulls together to get it done, basically. So it's nice. Someone at school, their kind of equivalent experience might be something like finding something at school particularly hard, or a piece of coursework quite hard, and then showing resilience and looking for ways to kind of approach that task differently. So if they could say, I found this piece of work really hard, went and got help about it, or found a different way of approaching it, and they could demonstrate that they'd encountered a problem and overcome it, which would show resilience, adapting, problem solving. And within actually explaining the answer in the interview, they would show good communication skills. So kind of all within that, you kind of ticked all those things.
In times of crisis and emergency, and this is an emergency, we always have to seek some support and help from other people. And so what's really important in this situation is there are only a relatively small number of trained public health people who have the expertise to deal with most of the questioning. But what we do then, we look at across the authority transferable skills. So we had some specific tasks to do, which we were able to seek help and support from people who've never worked in public health. So, and I'll give you an example. You would have heard a word around PPE. So think about masks and gloves. And so personal protective equipment was a really, really key bit. The ask was, how do we get the personal protective equipment from point A in a central spot out to all the different hospitals, the GP practices, the schools, the care homes? And we didn't have the skills or the number of the staff to do that. So what did we do? We looked across our colleagues in Devon County Council and says, who has transferable skills around project management? Who can organise well? Who can have good communication skills? Who can build relationships across the patch? And we managed to basically pull people in to work on topics which they had no knowledge on at all. But that didn't matter because we had the expertise. We could tell them the expert knowledge, but what they did was bring their transferable skills. But we also did it in the community with volunteers. You would have heard about people volunteering to drive cars and vehicles and get food for people. That's all about transferable skills into a new setting. And what we're finding now is people who've had no experience of public health prior to this now have been working with us for 6 months are going, wow, public health is fantastic. You know, I didn't realize I could work in public health, but actually my skills I had beforehand around understanding data, communication, logistics, they're all transferable skills, and we can give them the training for public health. So we've got a whole new army of public health people now who never worked in public health before, which is fantastic. For me, when I do interviews, particularly of young people who haven't worked within public health, or undertaken any public health training, I look for a number of key things. The first thing I look for is passion and enthusiasm for the topic. So, you know, if a young person came into an interview and talked to me about their desire to improve the health of the population, to tackle child poverty and fuel poverty, and to reduce inequality. So a real kind of passion for the greater good of reducing social injustice. That's a really key point for me, because I can teach them, we can teach them and support them to get the qualifications and experience in relation to public health. But I can't give somebody who has no passion or commitment to wanting to improve the health of the population. I can't train people on that. So first it's about being passionate and being enthusiastic. And
there were lots of different people doing the same job as me, people from all sorts of different backgrounds. Some had some care experience, but many of us didn't. So there was one person who was a just finished year 11. There was a couple of people who had finished A levels. I think, well, firstly, being able to work as part of a team was very important, because we were quite a random group of individuals put together at short notice, and it had to work. It, you know, it wasn't really an option to, I don't know, recruit a whole load of other people. We because there wasn't time. Our team had to work, and we did. So I think everybody really had good team working skills. So, you know, the ability to be able to get on with other people from a whole range of other backgrounds. That was really important to be able to work as part of a team.
Okay, so it's really important to work on your strengths, but it's also vital that you understand what your strengths are. And understanding your strengths also leads you to understand on some of the things that you can improve on. So for me, I've experienced difficulty with technology, and that is not a skill that I have naturally, but I've had to work on that so that I'm able to interact, particularly while we're working at home and we're working a distance from each other. It's important to be able to interact and understand how these different technologies work. But if they're able to register for Young HPC, there's a lot of resource available that I have designed and provided so that young people can be the best candidate they can be. So I've given advice about how to make your CV really strong, how to identify your strengths and how to work on those things that you're not so strong at, and be able to provide examples. But it's important that you work on yourself as a young person to be that best candidate you can be.
Since the outbreak of COVID-19 and lockdown and people having to work from home, I think people have had to dig deep into finding the skills they may have already had or develop new ones to support their work. For many people, initially, that was about being resilient. But maybe the kind of fourth aspect is being goal and task orientated. So knowing that your job could be done 9 to 5, or it could be done at different times, but what matters is that the task that you're expected to do gets done. And when people start to think along those lines and think about goals and success, then I think they feel more motivated and happy to work in a changing environment. And suddenly not being in the office doesn't feel quite so important when you're really focused on what you're trying to achieve to help people or to deliver a particular product or service. So those key kind of attributes have been really important to people at this time.
People have used technology such as this to get to know staff members that little bit more. You know, so we've had that, we've tried to use that time just to, rather than sending an email, which was perhaps the old way of doing it, actually, you know, using Microsoft Teams for us and calling, and while you're calling, they're not just getting the answer to your question or raising the point, but also, you know, a bit more about that person. So I think we've got to know each other through, it's quite, you know, it's not a massive organisation, 800 odd staff, but it's big enough that there's plenty of people who don't know that well. So really, if you're a young person coming into the workplace, it doesn't matter what your skills are, there will be a place for you somewhere in that workforce. And that can be either, you know, down on a grassroots farm, working on a dairy farm, managing cows, milking cows, very technical job these days, or it can be as an engineer in a dairy, you know, making sure that the bottling plant works when it needs to work, or it could be as a distribution driver. There's so many different jobs all in the same food chain. And it doesn't matter where you are, but you can still then help deliver that service of great British food onto British people's plates.
I think throughout this, one of the main key things that I've witnessed and seen is empathy, particularly around where, you know, we've experienced vulnerability from our customers, and a sheer understanding of how those customers might be feeling, so that we're able to still welcome them to the branch and help them with whatever they needed to do. There was a few exercises actually that we carried out throughout lockdown, where we identified specific vulnerable customers, and during our reduced opening hours, after we'd close, we'd stay in branch and call out to those vulnerable customers, and therefore make sure that they were okay, even if it was just a quick chat on the phone. But the idea was to talk to them really about how they were coping during lockdown from a financial perspective, and indeed from a personal perspective. And where we were able to then either give them alternative ways to do things, or order them cash cards so that they could get access to their money 24 hours a day. And quite often there were things completely non-bank related, where we were able to get vets out to dogs that were ill, or indeed some people that were particularly feeling the effects of lockdown, able to put them in touch with charities where they're able to receive food parcels and things like that. So it was absolutely a real delight to be able to contact those customers and help them, not just banking wise, but in other ways as well. And those calls were really warmly welcomed by our customers.
Yeah, skills is a difficult one, because obviously as an apprentice, you're going to be taught skills. So we're not necessarily looking for people to be skilled in the role. And I think that's a lot of people make that mistake, that if they're coming in and they're asked, they want to be an electrician, we don't expect them to be an electrician when they come for interview. The biggest thing is to have an interest, show a bit of passion, try and do a little bit of research for the role as well. Don't go along thinking you need to be an expert in your chosen apprenticeship. That's what an apprenticeship does. It teaches you to be an expert. You don't need to be one to start with. You just need to show a little bit of passion and enthusiasm for the role.
I'd say you definitely have to be flexible, because you sort of manage your own time. Like, you don't have a set break time. You don't have a set routine. You sort of have to make your own routine and fit in the work around what you need to work on. So I think that's quite a lot of responsibility, because there's quite a lot to study and quite a lot to get done. So it's important that we're flexible and that we're determined to get it all finished within deadlines. And I think that's been really good and challenging at the same time.
So when we went virtual with our assessments, we really had to think about how do we measure things like problem solving and adaptability and interaction. And I think one of the challenges for anybody is utilising something like Zoom or Microsoft Teams. So it was, how confident are they talking essentially to themselves, because that is what it feels like. But also things about making eye contact and some of those problem solving skills. So whilst standard interview questions that you might expect, we completely went away from tradition. So some of our questions were things like, you've been gifted an elephant and you're not allowed to sell the elephant and you're not allowed to give the elephant away. So what do you do with the elephant? You know, so things very much around kind of a bit of innovation, a bit of problem solving, and also for us, a bit of creativity and maybe the odd sense of humour. And that's really what we look for, especially in our young apprentices. They're not going to have experience of our industry. They're not necessarily going to have experience in the world of work. So for us, it's about what they like as an individual. How do they think? Are they going to think, and are they going to bring something to the business?
So employability skills, when we look at that at Wessex Water, it's teamwork is always the one that comes, I think, highest ranked whenever I speak to people, and what our managers tend to look for. At the end of the day, even if you're working independently, you're still going to be a part of the team. So you need to recognise recognising your own strengths and how that then fits into teamwork for you. So whether you're more of a team leader or you're really good at following instructions and listening, or really good at speaking your mind but in a helpful way. I think that's something that we really look for at Wessex Water, definitely. So something that I find is most helpful when going to an interview or whatever is making sure that you have things to recall on. So experiences that you might have had. So we have a lot of people that come in and do like handy jobs around the house, whether it's just fixing their bike that they use to get to their part-time job or whatever on the weekend, or I don't know, working on their car, or even things that they might have done at school or college, so DT projects and sort of how they tackled that. Sort of, it doesn't have to be, I've had 3 years experience doing this job, so I know everything about it and that's why I should have an apprenticeship, because the apprenticeship is about learning and progressing and finding out that knowledge for yourself in that environment. So we just look for sort of those things that they can draw on that show that they're going to put in, I guess, extra work, and the fact that they really want that apprenticeship to better themselves and work hard, become part of a company that's going to work together as a team to provide a service. And I think they can then work on that and adapt to that in that interview. I mean, we as well look more on personality than grades, just because personality does say a lot about a person. So if they can show off a little bit of sense of humour, or you can tell sort of what their motivation is, I think that really helps them take that extra step forward in an interview.